Okay, hi everybody. It's time to do some stuff. And the stuff I'm talking about is, believe it or not, an essay. Are you ready to write an essay for the first time in this class? It doesn't matter if you're not ready because we're doing it. Here we go. Here is essay number one. This is the simple one. This is supposed to be nice and easy. Your personal history and education is the name of this one. Check your syllabus for the due date, but it should be basically a 1 week cycle. This one is designed to be a short, quick, easy little essay. You should not be taxed too hard. This shouldn't be too crazy for you. Length here, 3 to 5 pages. Let me switch over to my whiteboard real quick and explain what I mean when I say 3 to 5 pages. That's a minimum, but that's not a maximum. Meaning, if you want to write more than 5 pages, you certainly can. You don't have to at all. 3 to 5 pages is the range that most people do this one in, and they do just fine. The other essays will have a different range, but it'll be a range all the same, and it'll always be a minimum, okay? But what that means then, obviously, is that 3 pages is the minimum. That's the lowest you can go. And when I say 3 pages, here's what I'm talking about. Obviously, 1 full page, 2 full page. If the 3rd page of your essay is that long, you have given me 3 pages, I suppose, but that is not actually 3 pages of essay, right? 3 pieces of paper does not necessarily mean it's full 3 pages. So I'll count this. I'll give you guys a deal this semester. If you fill up at least 2/3 of the page, I will kindly and reluctantly accept that as a full page. But in this case, that better be a freaking amazing 2 2/3 of a page. Push yourselves, guys. See if you can go beyond the bare minimum and go for that. But if you go under, you can lose points. You will lose points, that kind of thing. So be careful. Let's go back to the sheet real quick. Here it is. Okay, so when I say 3 to 5 pages, that's what I mean. Formatting is like we talked about in the syllabus, obviously typed up, of course. 12-point font, double-spaced, usual margins, and this one is worth a whopping 50 points. This is the lowest amount of points of all the essays. Let me read through this, and then I'll go over the fine bits and pieces in a second. So here's what it says. This is an informal essay designed to show me where you are in terms of your writing ability. I'd like you to consider your background and family history in terms of things like, but certainly not limited to, culture, heritage, location, or anything, and how those influences have gotten you to where you are today as a college student pursuing higher education, which of course you are. Go back in detail as far back as you think is pertinent to this assignment, but don't just give me like a bunch of simple facts. I'm not looking for the bullet point biography of your life. We moved from Seattle in 2011. I have a sister. Her name is Jane. She is nice. She is a senior in high school. She also wants to go to college. She wants to be a veterinarian. I mean, those details are important, but it needs to be more than that, okay? And I'll explain what I mean by that. Go in depth into your past and your family, your influences, and think about how that history has shaped your growth, both as a person and especially as a student, okay? Let me say it real quick before I read any further. These next 3 paragraphs that I just highlighted right there, these are suggestions. This is not a checklist. You do not have to talk about all these things. Don't force it if it's not the case. These are just some ideas, some suggestions, some things that might apply to you. But if they don't, write about the things that do, okay? So just some ideas here, but by no means am I going to expect you to have to write about all these things. If they fit, cool. If not, there's other stuff to write about, okay? So a good way, not the only way, but a good way to start would be by giving a short history of your family. Going back, I would say multiple, like 9 generations or more, or maybe even less would be certainly, I think, too much unless you really do think that's important. Give some information regarding your family's heritage and culture, or if you grew up with a lack of either, explain why. Or guys, guess what? If heritage and culture mean nothing to you in any significant way, then you don't have to write about that at all. It's just, again, an idea. Think about certain questions. Are you a first-generation college student, or do you come from a long line of relatives who've gone on to higher education? If you need to make a phone call or an email or a text or something for some personal research, reach out to some people, find some things out. Nothing wrong with that. It's always good to know. All right. From there, you can begin to talk about where you are today in terms of your family as well as your education. Think about your place in society as well. Did you, for instance, go to a private school or a broken down public school or somewhere in between those things? Think about where you fit in growing up and how your family related to that place. How did education affect your life? Consider questions like these as they apply. And at this point now you can begin to talk about where you are today as a college student. What has gotten you here? You can begin to connect the dots that you've laid out so far in your essay. For instance, have you felt pressured to come to college for a certain reason? Are you returning to college after a break from school? What do you want to do with your degree once you graduate? Do you even know what degree you have in mind? Whatever. Again, think about these types of questions in relation to your family and the influence or even the lack of influence that they have had on you and your choices. And a quick note about that last bit there. I've had students in the past say to me, oh, man, my family's, they're a bunch of dicks. My siblings are assholes and my parents are jerks and they've always been terrible to me. They've just been bad. Well, I hope that's not the case for you. I hope you have had wonderful, loving experiences with your friends and family, but sometimes negative influences can be just as influential or maybe even more so than the positive ones. It doesn't all have to be cute, happy, fluffy, punny, ponies and puppies and rainbows and clouds and stuff like that. If you don't want, you can go anywhere you want to, as long as it is talking about your influences. Okay, so reiterate one more time again, these 3 sections right here are just suggestions. Okay, if you just heard me read that stuff and you're like, wow, very few of those things apply to me, that's fine. Other stuff certainly has influenced you. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Last bit here, this is an informal essay. This doesn't need to be the best essay you've ever written in your life, essentially. I'm going to try to move you guys as best as I can now and throughout the whole semester away from that 5-paragraph essay format. If that's what you are comfortable with, I want to break that comfort zone and get you to expand your essays. But if you happen to write that style essay this time, not the biggest deal. Big bold letters say this right here. A series of facts is not what I'm looking for here. Yes, give me those facts about your history and influences, but you need to analyze what they mean and how they have shaped who you are today. This isn't just a simple bio. Okay? Hope you guys have fun. Hope you learned something, and I look forward to reading it. That's essay number 1. Now, this sheet right here that I just read is available for you to download, and I encourage you to do so. It's available for you to download right this second off of Blackboard. I encourage you, please go download it, read it on your own, keep it, fill in all the things that you need to fill in, but you can get this yourself, all right? Let's go to the whiteboard. Let's talk about this whole thing. Let me erase that stuff that I just put up there. So this is going to be, as I said, an essay about the thing that you know the most in this world, and that is you. And that's a positive thing for sure. It can be a negative thing though too, because remember what you guys are doing in this case is combing through all the different influences that you've had. Let me give you guys a thesis question. I'm always going to give you guys a thesis question for these assignments because, of course, an essay revolves around a thesis statement, right? So then what are you going to be answering throughout this essay? What am I hoping your essay reflects and focuses around? The thesis statement, the thesis question this time is basically a couple of things. Who or what have been the biggest influences in your life? That's the main question, number 1. Emphasis on biggest. I mean, that really is essentially what this essay is going to be focusing on as a whole. It does, of course, need to be linked back to your educational pursuits and your educational history and experiences. But ultimately, what you're doing here is talking to me about what are the things that have gotten you to where you are today. They could be people or a single person. It could be a number of different events. It could be experiences you've had, classes you've taken, teachers that have taught you things. It could be yourself. It could be a thought. It could be a dream that you had one time. Guys, it could be anything. As long as you identify what those influences are. And then what you need to do, as all essays do, is to back it up. And the backup, the backup for this one, well, let me go ahead and just write a question right here. Here's another question, and I mean this as literally as I possibly can. Every single detail that you guys decide to divulge to detail to talk about in relation to your influences in this essay should have a direct and specific answer to this question I'm about to write. How or why? This is a pretty obvious question, but believe it or not, people skip this. How or why have people, or have or has this influenced you or affected you? I'm going to emphasize you here because this is an essay about you. It's not about the people or the things in your past. I don't want to hear a story just about what's going on in your past. It's got to connect to you. So let me give you an example. Let me tell you like a sample paragraph I might get from somebody. Let's say somebody's thesis is, my biggest influence, I'm just going to focus on one person. It's Grandpa Joe. Okay, cool. Grandpa Joe has been the biggest influence in my life. This essay is going to talk about Grandpa Joe. That sounds okay to me. So then the body paragraph should get into Grandpa Joe, right? And explain this. But here's body paragraph number 1. Grandpa Joe, wow, what a guy. Man, he has been there for me my whole life. Let me talk about Grandpa Joe. Grandpa Joe was born in 1937 in a small town in Italy. It was a small fishing town, and he knew that there was not going to be much for him there other than to get married and have kids. So he decided when he was 17 years old to jump on board a freighter that was headed across the ocean, and he had 2 nickels to rub together in his pocket, but he landed in New York City, and he made his way up to Boston, and he started working as a longshoreman at the docks in Boston, and he just absolutely started just working hard. He met my grandma a year later. They got married within 6 months, and 6 months later, all of a sudden, my mom is born, all this stuff, whatever. Grandpa Joe, great, what a guy. Okay, and that's it. That's the paragraph. What's missing? This stuff is missing, right? This is not there. They never get into, here's how, in this case, Grandpa Joe affected me. Here's how he influenced me, right? It's doing this thing that I'll talk about a little bit more later. It does this sort of like, you know what I mean style writing. A lot of author or essay writers do this, and I'll talk about this in a different video, a little bit more detailed, but people do this thing where they just assume that their audience already knows what it is that you want to say about Grandpa Joe. I mean, well, you could make an assumption based on what I just told you, right? What? Grandpa Joe built himself up from nothing. He's a hard worker. So thus then, how did it influence the writer? Well, they must have been influenced also to be a hard worker, right? But that's an assumption. I don't know that unless you come out and tell me. Your reader doesn't know that. Because for all I don't know, let's say Grandpa Joe worked so hard, he was never home. Grandpa Joe worked his ass off, but he was gone until 10 o'clock at night, and then he went out drinking with his buddies. He wouldn't, he'd stumble home, after 1 in the morning and get up at 6 in the morning and be gone. Grandpa Joe was never around. My mom would tell me stories about how she didn't even know her father, Grandpa Joe. Grandpa Joe's a dick. I don't want to be like Grandpa Joe ever. That's what I learned from Grandpa Joe. I don't know, right? Unless this is explained and answered as specifically and in as much detail as you possibly can, I'm not going to know what you're telling me about these things. So don't just give me the facts and the details. It can't just be, here's who this person is, or here's this thing that I did. It's got to explain, here's how or why this is something that has affected me. And again, I emphasize the biggest influences. You can look back through your life and, count into the millions of different things that have influenced you. But what I want you guys to focus on are the things that have really influenced you the most. The turning points in your life, the doors that have opened or closed, especially again in relation to education. There should be a section related to that, no doubt. But just what are the things that have gotten you here? And, I can list off a million different things, but it's only going to be based on you and what has affected you in some way, somehow. Okay. That's ultimately what this essay is really going to be about. Now we're going to look at we'll look at just one sample essay for this one. One of the things we're going to do for all these assignments is I'm going to show you guys previous student samples. I think just one will be enough for essay number 1, but other ones will have 2 or even 3. And sometimes they'll be really, really good. Sometimes they'll be so bad you'll laugh out loud. Sometimes they'll be somewhere kind of floating in between. And I'll have you guys read them, and then we'll break them down and talk about what's working so that you could, make the same triumphs or avoid the same mistakes that those essays might be doing, right? But ultimately, right now, what you guys need to do is comb through and make a list. Think about, again, what are the biggest influences? Maybe you can think right now off the top of your head, you can list off, 5, 6, 7, 8 things that may or may not apply to what your essay will be maybe focused on. Now, do you want to write about all 8 of those? You could, maybe not. Maybe one of these is your sister, one of these is your brother, and one of these is your cousin, but maybe all 3 of those could be lumped into one paragraph. Or your mom and your dad, but they could be in a paragraph about your parents. Or maybe you do want to give mom her own paragraph. Or maybe you want the whole essay to be just about mom. That's fine too, okay? But right now what you really have to do is think back to all those different things that have influenced you. Make a list and think about what are those things which things are going to be the ones that I want to write on, and which are the ones that, now that I think about it, maybe my cousin, she's great, but I don't know, maybe I don't have as much to say about her. But that internship that I had last spring, definitely, I didn't even think about that till just now, but I learned so much from that. And, my experience in 7th grade when I did this and did that, great. This is the time to start kind of getting things going. Now, one of the next videos you guys are going to watch, in fact, the next 2 videos are going to be all about sort of what the essay is, how the essay works, probably some review and stuff like that, as well as techniques for what to do before you start writing. So I'll let you guys watch those. Those will be up next. But as I'm going through that kind of general stuff, it's not specific just to essay number 1. Think about what you want to do and how essay number 1's information will apply to what it is that you're talking about and how to kind of come together. Okay. Cool. So jump on, and the other thing I'd like you guys to do is to jump onto the discussion board. You should find a week 1 discussion board link. If you go to Blackboard, you'll see over on the left side of the screen, there's a bunch of links, and one of them's the discussion board. We're going to do these pretty much weekly. On the discussion board, what I'd like you guys to do is go to the first one, and it's basically just a chance for you to start free writing. There'll be more specific instructions on the discussion board itself. But basically, do some free writing, some open writing, whatever you can think of. Maybe a lot of stuff like this. I'm not looking for paragraphs or essays here by any means, but basically start kind of just brainstorming on paper or on the computer screen. Whatever ideas are coming up for you for essay number 1, get some stuff out. I'd like to see some ideas kind of getting thrown out there, and I can hopefully I can start giving you guys some early feedback or advice if you need it, or just kind of take a look and see. I just want to make sure everybody is working towards something by the end of this first week here on essay number 1, because again, this one is due very soon. So don't let this one sit on the back burner. Get the idea balls rolling and start pushing them up the hill. Okay, as always, if you have questions, let me know, but that's the kickoff for essay number 1. Go download that handout if you didn't already. Go watch the next 2 videos, which will give you some good kind of writing advice, I think, and then there'll be one to follow, taking a look at the first sample essay, the only sample essay for essay number 1. Okay, thanks, bye.